Now what we're going to look at here is the Centaur Dozer. It's an ordinary tank, but as you can see it's been rearranged without a turret in order to take a powerful bulldozer blade. The idea was to have a vehicle that could move as fast as a tank and could be used to bulldoze its way through the rubble of cities which we had previously bombed. Don't ask, it's too terrible. But the tank has no turret, and the reason it has no turret is because there's a winch in there. And that winch was connected to rope, which came up through the top of the jib here and down into the back of the bulldozer blade to raise it and lower it. The bulldozer blade, as you'll see, is hinged on brackets on the side. And the whole idea was that you lifted the blade up when it wasn't running, it wasn't needed to bulldoze, and lowered it for bulldozing. And that rope is now missing. We tried to replace it with ordinary rope and they didn't succeed at the time, so we've got it without at the moment, but that's what ought to be there, is these lengths of rope to hoist the blade up and down. Now, they had bulldozers before, and they had ordinary Caterpillar D8s, usually armoured, and they were used for ordinary bulldozing jobs, but they really needed something that would keep up with other tanks. And that's why they chose the Centaur hull. They did actually have a version of the Sherman with a bulldozer blade attached to it. And that was used both in Britain and in Italy. But I think they decided, as usual, that they wanted a British version. So they introduced the Centaur, which was a redundant type of tank that they weren't using for any other purpose. And they weren't using it for any other fighting purpose. And that's why we've got Centaur Dozers and why we've got one here. They were attached to 79th Armoured Division, but they were only really used from the end of 1944 into 1945. And then that was the end of the Second World War by May 45. After that, you'll find them still with the Royal Engineers, still operating in peacetime, if you like. And they were used up to the Suez campaign, definitely. We know one was out in Suez and did some bulldozing there. So they had quite a long post-war existence. It's powered by a Liberty V12, which isn't the same. The original Cromwell, which is a similar tank to the Centaur, had the 600 horsepower Rolls-Royce Meteor in the back, or at least the Merlin, in fact, in the back. But they called it the Meteor there. And that made it a more powerful and acceptable tank. The Centaur with the Liberty was a bit underpowered and wasn't used in anything like the extent that the Cromwell was. But it was used for things like this, for this bulldozer and that sort of thing. And you've got the driver sitting here behind the circular opening and the commander in this little box on the right. And that's it. You only needed the crew of two to operate the whole vehicle. And it's quite an unusual thing. It doesn't look much like a fighting tank, but it did serve a purpose during the Second World War, and that's what it was. To bulldoze rubble out the way and make a path for other tanks through bombed out cities and rubble strewn streets. That was the purpose that lay behind these vehicles.